Are we heading for recession next year? Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. Cheers to those of you that are still working on this week just before Christmas. I thought we would have a look at an interesting article where economists are predicting and making predictions about the Australian economy and asking whether we will head to recession or what's going to happen next year. Now, before we go through this, and I'm going to have a shot of my stein of coffee, I'll let us know in the comments what you think. What do you reckon? What do you think the chances are of Australia entering into an official recession next year? And when, if you think we do, when in the year do you think it'll happen? So here we go. Fine. You drink 2 liters of coffee a day? That's not too much, is it? No, I'm sure it's healthy. I'm sure it is. And if people ask, yes, I will drink a stein at night. But, you know, being an architect, you build up a tolerance to this stuff. So, low interest rates, a slight growth pickup, risks to the downside, where economists see Australia in 2020. So, this is going to be interesting. I'd like to see what range of economists they have, because I'm reading more and more about the Austrian School of Economics. And fundamentally, one fundamental issue that I have with a lot of the economic theory or arguments that are put forward as outside the Austrian school is the assumption that people are rational actors. We're not rational. We're emotional beings. We're easily manipulated. So rather than having the spirit animals that the Keynesians and the Chicago School, all that lot, argue for, you could just understand that sometimes people aren't rational. And so, yes, I'm concerned, or skeptical, shall we say, about some of the predictions that are made if people have that one of those fundamental arguments to their theories. So let's go through this. This year was one many would like to forget when it comes to Australia's economy. Economic growth slowed as households used extra income from tax and interest rate cuts to bolster savings and pay down debt rather than spend. Well, I would say that's a sign of a maturing economy. We can see here our wage growth has indeed, our GDP growth has indeed, slowed significantly, and it's trending down. Wage growth, well, the economists at the RBA have failed several times to predict wage growth. So you can see why, guys. You can see why I have little confidence in their predictive abilities. Maybe I'm just becoming too cynical and too old in my young age. The unemployment rate was stubbornly above the Reserve Bank's updated target of 4.5% for full employment, needed to spur wage growth, which remains subdued and heading in the wrong direction. Despite calls for economists and the RBA for greater fiscal stimulus in the form of increased infrastructure spending, or even more tax cuts, the federal government dug in and said it will deliver the first several surpluses at the end of the financial year, albeit smaller than the first forecast. Now, I'm skeptical of infrastructure spending. I think that can lead to the broken window fallacy, and most of the infrastructure spending that Australia is intending to do looks like it's all on roads. I would love it if there was maybe some infrastructure spending dedicated to, nuclear power generation, maybe some 4th gen, advanced technology. We might be able to catch up to North Korea. Or, maybe just some water infrastructure. That might be good. Try and reduce some of the fundamental costs in the economy. Because when we looked at business confidence, the Australian business confidence from NAB. Now, this data was telling us that business conditions are kind of remaining subdued, but still, not ticking up or down. But business confidence went down, and one of the factors in business confidence is power costs. And are we interested to see if the continued drought and all the bushfires has an impact on that as well, particularly in the next year? So, where does this leave the Australian economy heading into 2020? 11 economists gave their views. So the short answer, outlook for 2020, not great. Expectations for economic growth better than 2019, but below potential. And what I'll do is let's just bring up this video I did here. This is where I asked the question in September: is Australia in a depression? And I put it to everyone. This was from a talk I watched with Jim Rickards. And his argument was that you've got trend growth here of an economy. And in the US, they were below. The economic growth was depressed. So they had this much loss in potential economic growth. And this is the definition for depression, a lot of people think it's just a mega recession or a times 2 recession. Well, no, technically, if you look at the Keynesian approach, it's a period of below trend growth. So the Australian economy, and we'll look at it later, I go through all the Excels here, we've been below trend for a while. And our growth trend is heading down. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that we will be below potential. And I'd argue even our potential is getting worse. They're asking, will tax cuts and rates be enough to boost household consumption? Probably not. Yeah. And will the cash rate finish in 2020? And here they're saying 0.25%. Now that's worrying to me because that is when QE kicks in. That's when QE kicks in. And that's a whole other world of mess. And the majority of Australians are simply going to lose out when that kicks in because of the decreased purchasing power of our fiat money. And here we go, chances of a recession in Australia next year. They consider it slim. And what will happen to the dollar? Not much. And the biggest potential surprise if things improve faster than expected. Okay, so these are the short answers. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these ones. Do you think the chance of a recession next year in Australia are slim? If we're not technically in a recession, but our money is losing value at an insane rate due to QE, does it matter? Does it matter? If our GDP is going up, it still isn't actually decreasing, but the value of the products is plummeting, the financial value, if we take inflation into account, how will that work? The hidden tax. So outlook for 2020 in one sentence, not great. Looking ahead to next, the economists surveyed were not optimistic. The Australian economy will struggle to gain momentum, said Marcel Delant from Capital Economics. Slightly better 2020 than 2019, but nothing to shoot the lights out, said Commonwealth Bank senior economist Gerard Arid. Asked to give a brief summary of the outlook, the answers were mostly variations on the same theme. The Australian economy heads into 2020 with a bad case of the flu, and it needs some TLC from both the RBA and fiscal policies. Here's the thing. Fiscal policies, if the government ramped up spending and put all this money into infrastructure and more roads, is that just going to burden future generations with the debt, infrastructure? That's not that innovative. What's the benefit? Most believe that the TLC should take the form of increased fiscal stimulus, with monetary policy already doing a lot of the lifting, and at least one more interest rate cut by the Reserve Bank priced in by mid-2020. Others were slightly more upbeat as the housing market turns around, including REA Group's chief economist, Nerida Conisbee. Okay, the turnaround has purely been fueled by one sector, the upper quartile in the real estate sector. We're seeing that. And they're averaging it out to give the perception that everything's going up. How many people have you met? I know people who've got upper quartile houses that are having trouble moving it here in Brisbane. And it was passed in at auction. Funny that. Australia's economy is slowly recovering, but there are still issues. We are much better shape in 2020 compared to this year. Well, I mean, that's positive news. That would be nice if it were true, wouldn't it? And expectations for economic growth. Better than 2019, but below potential. Now, why? I want to know why they're arguing this. The forecast for Australia's economic growth in 2020 range from 2% at the bottom end of the scale to 2.5% at the top end of the scale. But see, this is the thing. We're seeing. This is it right here, this wage growth chart. This is an example of forecasts done by some of our economists here in this civilization. They didn't get it right since 2011. So what makes anyone think that this is going to be right here? If you keep arguing it up over and over again, that's when you have to step back and go, okay, maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with the methodology I'm using. Wouldn't you? Haven't you done that? I mean, if you're modeling up a project and someone buggers up or the file corrupts, you got to fix it. You got to find out what's going on. Okay. I'd expect to see growth around 2.25%. to 2.5%, particularly in the absence of any further material stimulus from the government, said Alex Joyner, chief economist of IFM Investments. Well, okay, there's our quarterly growth. Cool. JP Morgan senior economist Ben Jarman has forecast a better recovery to around 2.25% GDP growth, but said that will not be enough to offset the spare capacity in the economy after this year's slowdown. The federal government has likewise forecast growth of 2.25% in the next financial year through to mid-2021. The Reserve Bank, well, of course they're going to. I mean, of course they're going to. They're always going to give the most optimistic or a more optimistic interpretation of the data, aren't they? I mean, they have to. They have to. The Reserve Bank's forecasts are even more optimistic, with 2.75% growth forecast over 2020, lifting to 3% by 2021. Okay. I'm sorry I'm bringing this up over and over again, but I've got no confidence in their ability to forecast. Let me know in the comments if you have confidence in their ability to forecast, and please explain to me why you do. Why you do when you're looking at that chart. I'm going to have a coffee, I'll give you time to do it. So, is it just going to be driven by, is it all going to be driven by just population growth? We are skeptical of the RBA's optimistic growth and inflation forecasts and see Australian GDP growth remaining constrained around 2% over 2021, said AMP Capital senior economist Diana Mozina. Spare capacity will still remain a problem, which will keep inflation and wages growth low. In the minutes of its December board meeting, the RBA opened the door to a downgrade to its current outlook. Members agreed that it would be important to reassess the economic outlook in February 2020, when the bank would prepare updated forecasts, the minutes read. So are we going to see our interest rate cut in 2020? Let us know in the comments down what you think, guys, and then we'll check back in February to this video and see who was right. Will the current tax cuts and rate cuts be enough to boost households? Probably not. This is the question for 2020, said BI's Oxford Economics chief economist, Sarah Hunter. In unwelcome news for the RBA and the government, retail spending and household consumption figures have shown people are choosing to pay down debt or increase their savings with the extra cash from interest rate cuts and tax refunds. Yes, that's good. That's good for the individuals. It's bad for a consumer-based civilization. For the tax cuts in particular, it may be a timing issue. For example, if the tax rebate was received towards the end of the third quarters, households might not have had a chance to spend it or saving it for Christmas. Equally, it could be that households have become more cautious and they are actively choosing to save more of their income and improving financial position. Well, let's just bring up this chart showing consumer sentiment. Maybe we should refer to that, guys, when we're talking about the impacts of these changes. Consumer sentiment has been subdued for quite a time, a low trend. There are more pessimists out there. That's why we've got the data. That boost to incomes from tax cuts and rate cuts suggests that consumer spending could lift down the track, but we only expect a muted impact, particularly over the near term, said St. George senior economist Jonah Chan. Westpac's monthly consumer sentiment survey supports the view, with respondents feeling increasingly pessimistic about the economic outlook and their own future finances. Okay, so there you go. I need a shot of coffee they got there. The green shoot is the recovering housing market, with national house prices posting the first annual growth in 19 months. Okay, well, here's a count of that green shoot. Building approvals in that sector. Okay, I would put the argument that this recovery in the housing market is driven by a sense of FOMO, is driven by artificially low interest rates by the RBA, is driven by, well, deceptive auction clearance rates data and articles in the news, and by social capital of a young generation that has never experienced a recession and an older generation that only knows property to go up. Maybe they're mistaking, a good market for intelligence. Very strong price growth isn't always great for consumer confidence, says Nerida. It needs to be from REA Group. Compare how a multi-property owning baby boomer is feeling right now to a 30-something Sydney renter trying to get in the market. Yeah. Well, the smart boomers are selling out, if they can, getting rid of the investment properties and cashing up. We've seen that. We've seen that happening in Sydney. I don't think raising house prices on their own will be enough to get consumer spending again. We really need to see wages start to rise, unemployment to fall, or more tax cuts. Callum Pickering, economist at job site Indeed, agreed that wage growth is a crucial element. As long as wage growth remains low, we should expect household consumption to grow at a modest pace, he said. Well, yes, of course, because people need to spend, save increasing amounts just to get a home. And I think some people are just not even bothering getting a home. I mean, some of the cost of these houses and the size of these mortgages just are terrifying to me personally. You know? Where will interest rates be at the end of 2020? Short answer, 0.25%. Of the 11 economists surveyed, 9 expect 2 more rate cuts to take the cash rate to 0.25 by the end of 2020. That follows 3 rate cuts in 2019 to a historic low of 0.75%. Some of this was passed on to home loan borrowers, but not all. I mean, these cuts, I don't know how much money it will put in the hands of consumers, but I'm more worried about how much QE it will generate. That's what has me worried. You know, and they're not going to do, Steve Keen's approach to QE. They're not going to do that. They'll just do the standard or copy what every other country's done and where it's just failed again and again and again. Because if you're an economist, you just do the same thing over and over again, I think. They're treating a social science like a hard science. And they're trying to understand an advanced emergent system with just bits of outdated data and cobbling it together. That's the feeling I'm getting. So the remaining 2 economists, REA Group's Nerida Conisby and BIS Sarah Hunter, each tipped 1 more cut to 0.5, but Dr. Hunter sees downside risks to her forecast, so thinks 0.25% is a possibility. This year, the Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe said the central bank would be prepared to do unconventional things if warranted. However, economists were divided on whether 2020 will be the year the RBA resorts to quantitative easing. Capital Economics' Marcel Thilliant expects a QE program to be launched in the second half of the year. Okay, what do you think, guys? Do you think QE is inevitable? Is Australia going to get QE? And if you do, what's the best way to prepare? Buying metals? Buying crypto? Borrowing to a hilt and waiting for inflation to decimate the... Let me know. We suspect the RBA will buy government bonds rather than other assets, he said. Callum Pickering from Indeed agreed QE is more likely than not by year-end without further government stimulus, but not everyone thinks QE is likely. While there is a significant risk that the RBA eventually needs to introduce QE, our forecast suggests that that won't be triggered in 2020, says ANZ's Miss Emmett. Or they could just let the economy go into a recession without artificially stimulating it and destroying so much in the process. I mean, can America even get out of QE? They're not QE now. This whole repo thing is insane if you start digging down that rabbit hole. And just look at Japan, guys. Look at Japan. I don't believe it will want to go down the path lightly, says IFM investor Alex Joyner. Well, what would be the alternative? Will people switch to a crypto? Just say, no, I'm not participating in this financial system. I'm going to step out. I'll do all my business in cryptocurrency. Could that even happen? Let me know what you think, guys. Is that the only way to get away from this? Or go back to, trade in silver? So Australia has a 28-year run without a recession. This is not expected to change next year. Well, okay, that's an interesting claim, but guys, look at this. The economy's been depressed. If you look at it on a GDP per capita basis, it looks terrible. We've been propped up by luck, by foreign resource prices and population growth. For those economists willing to put a numerical value on the risk of Australia going into recession, the predictions range from a 5% to a 30% chance. A technical recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction, and most agree a significant shock will be needed for that to eventuate. Maybe a significant shock could be the perpetual trade war overseas affecting demand for some of the natural resources that Australia is exporting, guys. Let's jump over here, and I will bring up the Observatory of Economic Complexity. And I know a lot of people have seen this before. This is one of my favorite websites that I refer to. But this is important for people who haven't been introduced to it, guys. So just, bear with me. Have a coffee. I mean, look at all the natural resources that Australia is exporting. And look at the nations that we're exporting them to. China. And one takeaway I harp on all the bloody time is just the complexity of our economy. Do you think building more roads is going to increase that complexity? And this is the good assessment of our economy. I'll bring up the other one. Let's bring up the Harvard one. With OEC, we're at 59th in the world. With the Atlas from Harvard, we're, 93rd in the world, guys. And they're predicting our growth projection to 2027. Oh, crap. We'll be 111th in the world for growth. Okay, that's depressing. Let's get back to this article, guys. So, due to high population growth, a technical recession remains unlikely. Okay, there you go. They're banking all their hopes on our population growth. Okay, now, that's a concern because there's an infrastructure burden associated with that. And the problem is, normally a population growing is fine, it's good, if you can keep up with it. But our population growth hasn't maintained it. Just look at the water. Look at our potable water capacity. Our population has grown by a quarter. Our potable water has grown under 2% in the same period since about 2000. So, that said, for many Australians, the economy may feel like a recession, with job insecurity and wage growth disappointing. Yes, that's it. I did a video, 80% of people are already living like they're in a recession. CBA's Garrett Errod agreed that population growth will support overall demand. However, he noted that a per capita recession and rising unemployment rates are genuine risks. If those risks were to grow, there's still monetary and fiscal firepower to spend, said Nikki Bertley. So what will happen to the Australian dollar? And this is an interesting thing. This is a concerning thing. If the dollar drops too far, will the RBA need to push up interest rates to address it? The economists' forecast for Australian dollar range from 64 cents to 71 US cents. The lower end of those forecasts will be depreciated from the range of 67 to 69 cents it has traded in since August. The Reserve Bank wants a weaker currency to help boost Australia's international competitiveness, but with other central banks also cutting interest rates, it may be difficult to achieve. Okay, let's jump here. Now that intuitively sounds good. Oh, fantastic. All of these goods will be more competitive on a global market. But all of these will be more expensive. Just look at refined petroleum. How many of these do you think will affect our day-to-day cost of living? How many of these won't? Say the dollar drops, cost of producing wheat, or maybe milk, or maybe baby powder, is cheaper in Australian or global scale. And all these companies that are owned by foreign, essentially government-owned organizations, what do you think they will do? How do you think they'll maximize their profits or their returns? Let me know your concerns in the comments below. I think a falling dollar will have more of an impact on our cost of living than people realize. In the absence of a commodity price shock, the most likely range for the Australian dollar is in the 67 to 71 range against the US dollar, said Dean's Callum Pickering, noting that a decline in commodity prices could see the dollar in the lower 60s. And that's the issue. That is the decline in the commodity prices. The biggest potential for a surprise for the Australian economy if things improve faster than expected. Most of the, or it could be a bubble. Rate cuts could facilitate another bubble. Most of the economists who spoke to the ABC said the biggest surprise would be if things got better faster and to a bigger degree than expected. For some, the surprise would be if the very thing they believe is delivered. Major fiscal policy stimulus to provide a strong boost to growth, said St. George's John Chan. Sarah Hunter thinks the surprise stimulus could be in the form of bringing forward income tax cuts currently legislated for 2023 financial year and beyond. I'd like that idea. If they're going to do anything, I would rather they give more money into the hands of the citizenry, the people, and the businesses that operate here, that actually employ people. That's one way to make us all more competitive, really easily. If we see signs that the government is preparing to cut income taxes in next year's budget, this would further support spending, she said. Housing is another issue at the front of mind heading into 2020. After a positive turnaround at the end of the year, that is yet to feed through to pick up elsewhere in the economy. AMP's Capital's Diana Musina is forecasting a 10% lift in house prices, so a 15 to 20% rise will be a very surprise. They may see APRA use macroprudential tools again. If house prices keep rising at the current pace, housing will quickly become extremely unaffordable, and that could result in a renewed downturn in these house prices. Now remember guys, when we had the boom in houses, between 14 and 17, this is the rate of foreign investment. That's tanked. That is tanked. So, and the stock on the market isn't the same. And remember, this is all hinging on foreign resource prices completely beyond our control. In many ways, we're a banana republic, or an iron ore republic. Others are looking offshore for unexpected developments. A lift in the global economy that raises sentiment here, nudges up commodity prices, and drives confidence to turn the economy around will be the biggest surprise for Deloitte economist Nikki Hutley. Overall, a group of economy watchers hoping for but not expecting a positive surprise for Australia in 2020. Okay, so here we have the take from these economists. Now, one question for concern. No one mentions the economic complexity of Australia. No one is referring to concerns for where we're sitting on a global scale. They're talking about housing prices. No concern that this is driving investment away from more productive aspects of the economy. Just the same old line. Just the same old line. And all the calls for fiscal spending or stimulus and government spending and infrastructure spending, nothing innovative, nothing outside the box. What if we had some special economic regions where businesses that established, maybe had a tax benefit? Or maybe places where you could work and you got instant access to your super to invest or pay down debt. Just thinking of ideas here, guys. Something a bit different. We're doing the same stuff over and over again. And we're just going to copy other countries that haven't fixed their mess. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Leave your predictions in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you are a fan and want to help us produce more content, we have a Patreon where you can make a small monthly donation. We also have a Amazon, eBay, and Independent Reserve affiliate links. We receive a small commission that doesn't cost you a cent. And finally, we have our very own pocket squares that we hand make here in Queensland. You can pick up on our website. Have a great time, guys. Merry Christmas to all of you if you're already on holiday, and I will talk to you later. Bye for now.